It's Lucia, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you think religion will become obsolete or like will always be something or
Will religion become obsolete? Can I tell you a story? I'm trying to find a way to make this story more relevant and more practical. There was a guy who was one of the founders of, I think, sociology or maybe anthropology. I'm not really quite sure which. I think sociology. His name was Auguste Comte. He was an interesting man. He was married to his first wife, and he found her to be insane. So he admitted her into a mental institute, I think. And then he fell in love with this 15-year-old. And he was like my age. I'm just kidding. He was maybe 35, 40. And he went to the parents of this young woman and, said, I want to marry your daughter. And they looked at him and they said, no, you're ugly. You have no money. Like what she said, you suck as a human being. So get lost. And he screamed, shouted, pleaded, but they said no. A few months later, she passed away. She died. She caught some virus and passed away. And he had fallen in love with her. He had someone paint a portrait of this young woman. And he nailed the picture or the frame to the wall. He put a chair right next to it. And every night, he would kneel, put his head on the chair, and worship the frame, which was symbolic of this woman. Auguste Comte. He had argued that first human beings worshipped nature. Good morning, Kendra. So if you go to the France and Spain paintings that were discovered some years ago, they date back about 30, 40, 50,000 years. It has to do with some guys or some gals. This is the paint wall. Horses and various other animals, and they're hunting them. And so he argued that initially, what human beings used to do was to worship the things that had a great amount of power here. You walk into the forest, it's night, and you panic because you're amongst huge things, and that's from the word pan. It's a god. And so initially our gods were down here. After a while we evolved. We began to think more abstractly. And we said, we don't like our gods to be down here. We don't like our gods to be like us, so close and personal, intimate. Let's push them up there. And so we created this thing called the pantheon, the Greek gods, for example. And you had a lot of gods up there in the heavens. And they're very much like us. They have envy, they have jealousy, they have resentment like Zeus and all those different deities. But it wasn't monotheism. The belief in a single God did not exist. And after a while, something happened to the human psyche, or maybe the human culture, and people came together, maybe, and they said, we don't want to believe in many gods. We just want to believe in one single God. And now you have Yahweh, now you have Allah, you have Jesus Christ, whomever your God may be, but you believe in a single deity. And then comes the 17th century and the explosion of the scientific revolution. You don't need religion anymore to explain life. You don't need to be like St. Augustine to kind of say there is a reason why there's a volcano. because God is angry with people. And one of the ways that God expresses and reveals his anger is by creating a tsunami. No, science came forth and said there's a reason. There are plates underneath the earth or inside the earth, and they begin to move, a lot of pressure is built, and all of a sudden things explode. So he believed that eventually religion is going to become obsolete because we'll figure out what to do. We'll figure out how to do things. If you read the Gospel of Mark, some guy all of a sudden walks in while he's giving a sermon, and the father goes to him and says, Satan has had my son from the moment he was born. Can you heal him? And Jesus looks at the guy and says, Satan, get out. And he's healed. Today the story is different. We look at brain chemistry. We look at the temperament of the person. We look at the history. We give him some therapy or her. And we create some support system. So it's not a disease that has come to us from, way above. It's something that's grounded, something that's down here. We can figure things out and understand them and find a way to remedy them. And I suppose you could think of it this way. You're connected to your mother. Then when you come out, you're nursed by her. Then you hold her hand when you want to walk. Then you want her very close by when you want to go to the bathroom or cross the street. And after a while, you look at her and say, Mom, I no longer need you. I can think on my own. I have money. I have a car. And that's what Auguste Comte believed, that eventually all things that used to be relevant and needed, they no longer are the moment you become somewhat sufficient. And that's what science does. Science makes you sufficient. If you go home and your fridge is empty, you need Safeway. If on the other hand, you go home and you open the fridge and it's filled and your cabinets are filled with ingredients, you don't need to go to Costco or anything. Your home is self-sufficient when it comes to cooking. That's if, of course, you're a good cook. But what happened with Auguste Comte is really strange. He created a cult and he made himself the head of this cult and he demanded to be worshipped. And regardless of your position, and it may be my own bias, my own history and background, I think there is something about us human beings. We are never content. We are never completely happy. You have a desire. The desire makes your life meaningful. You have a GPS, you have a purpose, you have a goal. And then, unfortunately, because our desires are relatively superficial and easily attained, you obtain what you wanted. And then you play with it. And then after a while, it's no longer interesting. And then you let it go. And then you have to pursue another desire because there's an emptiness that now lives inside you. And it whispers to you sometimes roars. What are you doing? Just sitting. Get up, do something, find some meaning, valuable thing out there to pursue. So I think Auguste Comte in many ways was wrong. And I think if he had any honesty, and I'm sure he had, maybe he had glimpses of it, that if there is no need for religion, why make a cult? Why make yourself a leader of a cult? Why have people? Why demand that people worship you? Because we need something to worship, something that we can touch and taste and smell. Do you have a boyfriend? Do you like him? Do you dare say love him? Imagine if you were self-sufficient. Your love expressed itself by you going home and writing or painting or making music. That instead of holding hands with some other person, you would just walk in the woods and be completely happy. Maybe as Diogenes, a great Greek philosopher, your best companion would be a dog. You wouldn't have a boyfriend who sometimes exercises power over you. So there are some biological factors. You need sex. Sometimes you need to talk to someone to just vent. But, the more self-sufficient you are, the less need you have for things on the outside. And in some ways, I think Auguste Comte is really good. That as we human beings become more sufficient, our need for things on the outside just diminish, which is good. And you have to kind of have no need because you're healthy, not because, there's stuff inside you that have not been resolved. There's nothing wrong with being single and being okay with being single, as long as your desire to be single is not rooted in some awful experience that hasn't been processed. Anyways, anyone else? Yes?
Atlas today.
Atlas? We can't talk about Atlas without talking about the Greeks. And we can't talk about the Greeks without talking about places like Mesopotamia, Egypt, Egypt, which is supposedly the oldest culture around. It's been there for about 5,000 years. So what you have in Egypt is there are three kingdoms: the old, the middle, and the new. In the old kingdom, this is Egypt. It lives in the middle of the desert. It's never invaded. No one can invade it. Because to invade Egypt means you have to cross the desert. But you haven't tamed the horses yet. You don't have wheels yet. There are no chariots, and so you can't walk on sand for like 5, 6, 7 months to get to Egypt. By the time you get there, you're dead. So Egypt remains protected for many, 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 many years. And they have this beautiful philosophy. Live your life. And once you die, you will enter the house of dust and darkness. You will die. It'll be fine. There is no God who's going to judge you. There is no hell. There is no paradise. You may, serve the Pharaoh, but they don't really have a philosophy of death or philosophy of afterlife. And when you look at their architecture, when you look at the statues that they have created, they don't look very attractive, and rightly so. It's still in its infancy. Art is. Then comes the Middle Kingdom. And the Middle Kingdom happens because of the following. Some people from some forsaken land, this is after some animals have been domesticated, namely horses. Wheel has been invented. Now you have chariots. Now you have people riding to Egypt. And Egypt gets demolished. For the first time in Egyptian history, people are forced to ask, why is this happening to us? And now, when the Egyptians finally conquered their invaders and kicked them out, they have a brand new philosophy. A philosophy of life, a philosophy of death, a philosophy of afterlife, a God who judges you. It didn't exist. And then their art becomes a bit better, more evolved. Long story short, the Greeks borrow a good amount of components from other cultures. And they create these geniuses, philosophers who lived before Socrates, and they really wanted to understand the nature of life, the reality of life. What makes life possible? Is there a God out there? Is it water? Is it fire? Is it air? Is it atoms? Is it physics? What exactly is it? So for the first time, what you have is this desire. And it's not completely accurate what I'm saying, because that desire has always lived inside us. But the Greeks were able to kind of put this in literature, in art, in beautiful ways. By the time art finds itself in the Greek world, after many, many revisions, for the first time, you have this desire for perfection. I want to taste perfection. I want to go into a building and feel its power, that God lives there. I want to be moved by it. If I hear music, I don't want the music to be listened through the ears of my head. I want the music to be heard and experienced through the ears of my heart. I don't want math to simply tell me what's in my wallet. I want math to reveal to me what lives in the perfected stage of God, harmony, order, the steps you got to take. Towards perfection. And then by the time that art goes through many revisions in the Greek world, you have this statue called Christos, this boy. He's got a six-pack. He has high cheekbones, square jaw, biceps that are defined. It's beautiful. And it's because the Greeks desired perfection. Not just perfection up there, but perfection down here. You know, that they wanted to be in the presence of a statue or an image that reminds them that human beings have the capacity and the potential to achieve perfection. You know, that's why someone like Plato or Socrates become the fountainhead or the foundation of all philosophical branches and concepts, because you can't surpass Socrates. It's impossible. He's like the Jesus Christ of philosophy. And there are not going to be two of them. It's just one. Now imagine now if you have been imposed upon by this concept. Be perfect in body, in mind, and in soul. Add to it, because you're a social animal, you look at your environment, but refrain from judging your environment. Observe. Come to a relatively decent, sober conclusion, and see if you can find a remedy. I mean, it's not easy to kind of keep turning the other cheek, as you have Jesus say to us. If someone slaps you on the right, offer the left. Well, what are you doing? Not only are you being assaulted physically, but you have to endure that. But you must also exercise empathy and compassion, which is putting yourself in the shoes of another, understanding their history, why that they express their frustration through physical anger. You know, why they wish to slap you as opposed to taking you out for a cup of coffee and tell you exactly what's happening on the inside. You have to endure all of that. Your own confusion as a human being, the chaos that lives in the social world, the chaos that lives in other people. And so the other aspect to this is the moment you're born, you have no choice but to carry the world on your shoulder. You have to figure out, I mean, it's such a cruel thing being a human being. T.S. Eliot once remarked that if you're an orange, you're an orange. You're fine with being an orange. If you're an apple, you're an apple. If you're a cat, you're a cat. If you're a human being, what the hell are you? Figuring out yourself, figuring out your friends, figuring out your parents, figuring out sex, figuring out justice, figuring out how to live and how to live well, figuring out how to die and die well. What happens to Atlas? All of life becomes a struggle. It's this heavy burden you have to carry on a daily basis. And if you truly have internalized that particular concept, look around you in this classroom. Some people are not very attractive. Some people can't talk. Some people this, some people that. And yet, every single person is symbolic of Atlas. They are carrying this heavy burden on their shoulder. And if you happen to be an immigrant, like some of us in this class, you have to please your parents. If you believe in God, there are certain do's and don'ts you have to follow because God said so. And then you have ulcer. and then you have strokes, and then you have therapy because it's just too much pressure on us. And it's interesting, I think that there is this flaw in us that desires perfection is a heavy weight that you and I have to carry. The fact that we're never satisfied. In one way, it's a very cruel joke played on the human being. In a different way, it shows that you have this great potential. That yes, your boyfriend is rich, yes, he speaks well, yes this, yes that, but you want something more. What exactly is it that you want? You don't know, and yet you're burdened by it. That's how it is. Everyone is a god, in their own right, because they have to carry the burdens of life, whatever shape or form that life may take. And if you know this also about other people, then you exercise compassion and generosity. Not all the time. And that depends on your age, your stamina, your patience, the sort of fuel you have left in your tank. Yeah.
When we're looking at someone like Atlas, should we be observing them from an outsider's perspective? Whereas if we're looking at, say, the story of Sisyphus, that's more of an internal perspective.
Before we talk about Sisyphus, intense introverts aside, we don't want to talk about them for now, at least. I think that when you're born as a kid, you're always on the outside. Your senses invite the world in, and the world defines you. Okay. There comes a point, and I'm not sure how it happens, there comes a point where something happens to you from the outside, and you react. And your reaction is because you internalize something. And then you react because of the internalization. Okay. There is another aspect of internalizing things. You internalize something, and then something about you detaches from certain parts of you, and you observe what's taking place inside you. What you experience now becomes very, very pragmatic, because now you begin to toy with it. It's like dough. Figure out how much it stretches, what its capacities are. And then out of that comes wisdom. Once you have internalized something, then what happens is the moment you begin to understand it, you become pregnant with this thing called insight, wisdom, understanding. If you happen to be very, very self-sufficient, and none of us are, if you're very self-sufficient, you keep what you've discovered to yourself. You don't need to share it with anyone. If on the other hand, you're just like the rest of us in this class, you will either write or you will go out there and talk to people about it. Okay? It's very much like Plato's allegory of the cave. First, you're attached to the shadows on the wall. Then you say, could there be more to life than the shadows? Now you begin to internalize. And internalization is a very, very difficult thing because it's filled with loss, it's filled with doubt, it's filled with darkness and confusion and dread and anxiety and frustration because you want to figure things out, but you can't. You can blame your boyfriend the first maybe 50 times. The 51st time, you kind of say, is there something wrong with me? And then you try to figure things out, and it's very, very difficult. Instead of blaming your boyfriend, now you say, maybe I am to be blamed. But where do you start? And the moment you start, what are you going to find? And when you do find a few things, how are you going to deal with the things you have found? Are you able to move through them smoothly? Are you going to be suffocated by the emotions brought forth by your discoveries? Will you have enough time to kind of overcome what you have witnessed within yourself and then go out there and express them to your friends? Okay. We had a student in this very class who's no longer here. this person wrote me some relatively disrespectful emails. Your class sucks. You suck. You're awful. There is no curriculum. I'm not going to do the work, and you can't force me. There are no directions. Now, all of this on the day where the assignment is due. Now, so this is a guy, I talk to him or her, and he just tells me you suck. Okay. So he reacts to something he or she has experienced. Okay. Time is going to pass because he's going to find or she's going to find that there are going to be lots of idiots like me around. And he can't fight all of them. And she can't complain to just everybody because you'll be out in the streets. You have no power over your boss who issues your paycheck. And then at a certain point, this person is forced, if they are lucky, or they can just move through life completely angry for the next 50, 60 years. They are forced to go in. And it can happen because their wife will leave them, their friends will leave them, maybe they'll have glimpses of their own reality, and then they have to figure out why. It's kind of like an AA program, you know. The story of Sisyphus is interesting because you need to know the entire story and how this thing takes place. All of us in this class are like Sisyphus. You live your life, you take classes. There comes a point where King Sisyphus looks around and says, oh my God, people are getting old. Oh my God, people are getting sick. People are dying. And once you die, you will be forgotten. I loved my grandmother and I love my grandfather. I rarely think about them. There are not very many people out there who are interesting. They have no relevance to us. They're not impactful. They're mediocre. And there's nothing wrong with that. Most of us are more than happy to just live our lives. What, Morpheus told, Agent Smith told Morpheus, look at people out there living out their lives, oblivious. Most of us are happy. We are happy for society to create buttons inside us and then push those buttons, and like rats, we just run around. Nothing wrong with that. And then you die. Hopefully a good death. Sisyphus sees all of this, but he has the capacity to internalize. Am I going to get old? That's a horrifying place to be. Am I going to get sick? More importantly, am I going to die? And the answer to all three is yes. But the most devastating question is, will people remember me? But how do you remember something if it has a great amount of value and meaning? There's a reason why we talk about Malcolm X, why we talk about Gandhi. And if you really are honest, look at human history for the past 5,000 years. How many people do we talk about? 10? 15 at the most? And it's quite embarrassing as a species that you've been around for a couple million years. And that particular category of life is only known by 15 of its perfected entities. That's it, 15, 16, 17. The rest, they come and they go. And I'm not quite sure how Sisyphus is feeling about all of this. I want to live forever. Imagine that I like you, and imagine that you like me. And I summon up the courage and I ask you out for coffee, and we go. And in the first hour, I find myself intensely attracted. I desire you, body, mind, and soul. And then you look at your watch and you say, Amir, I'm really sorry, I gotta go. I understood. Okay, see you around. Keep in touch. You don't text. You don't call. Days go by and I keep looking at my cell phone for a goddamn text, but none comes my way. For an email, for something. And I sit back and I say, really? Was I really not that interesting? Was I so easily forgettable? You and I struggle so much in life to make parts of our life valuable and meaningful and purposive. And in the end, you realize, you look in your bag and there is nothing. And Sisyphus is horrified. Hello, Phoebe. He doesn't know what to do. He doesn't want to be forgotten. We had someone here on campus. Her husband of 25 years died. The following week, she came to a meeting with her boyfriend. Part of it, sure, you go home and you're alone. And it sucks to be alone after being with someone, sitting next to someone, laying with someone for 25, almost 30 years. But don't you want to take at least like 5-6 months to process the grief, process experience? Have you no shame to walk on campus in a meeting with a goddamn boyfriend? Your husband just died, man. Have some decency. And imagine now her husband is up there looking down. 25 years, 2 weeks later, she has a boyfriend. How is that possible? Once the semester is over, you will not think about me anymore, and I won't think about you. You have not impacted me, and I have not impacted you, and that's devastating after 16 weeks. But that is life. But Sisyphus doesn't want that. There is another thing you need to understand about this particular story is whatever you thought right and wrong, good and bad, what is valuable, what is not in life are, the moment you internalize your own death and how easily you will be forgotten, none of those things matter anymore. You don't care about the couches and the sofas and the tables and the chairs you've accumulated. You don't even care for the information you've accumulated. They're not going to save you. So you know what Sisyphus does? He begins to read the Bible. He begins to read the Quran. He begins to have a chat with Eckhart Tolle and Sadhguru and all the teachers out there who claim to possess some nuggets of wisdom. So he goes to where Zeus is. You know why? Zeus is God. Zeus never dies. Zeus is immortal. Zeus has power. And Sisyphus lusts after it. Sisyphus does not want to be forgotten. And you know how you'll be forgotten? Death. That's the ultimate. And he tries to steal the wisdom of immortality from the gods. Zeus comes back because he was down here on earth having a good time with Semele, immortal women. And Hera, his wife, isn't home. Zeus comes back and all of a sudden catches Sisyphus. What are you doing here? I don't want to die. Please. I don't want to be forgotten. Really? Is that what you want? Zeus asks, yes. Okay. Go home, I'll make you immortal. And you'll have a task. One single task you will do for eternality. Every morning you're going to wake up. You're going to make yourself Noah's bagel with some cream cheese, some coffee. Then you're going to put your shoes on. Then you're going to go to the front door, open it, go outside. And then there's this huge boulder sitting for you, waiting for you. It's a rock. Looks like a ball, somewhat heavy, and you have to push it up this hill. And your only task is push it and just throw it over the hill. Okay. Sisyphus is happy because he will never die, which means he has power to always influence the people around him. It's kind of like the Green Mile, if you've seen the movie. Near the end, this old man looks at this woman and says, I am tired. Even though I can live on forever, I really want to die. I've lost my parents. I've lost 25 wives. I've lost 25 this, 25 that. You know, I fall in love with all these people. And then in the end, they die and leave me abandoned. Now, you have to be careful what you desire for, because it can come back to bite you. Every morning, Sisyphus wakes up. After making himself some food, he goes outside and pushes this rock up the hill. It's near the edge, but Sisyphus gets really, really, really tired. He can't take a step forward anymore, and the rock feels very, very heavy now. He steps to the side and watches this boulder, this rock, roll back down. He goes down and tries again, goes down and tries again. And this is what he does for the rest of his life. At a certain point, Sisyphus, he wakes up and he says, I know exactly how this is going to happen. I know the story of my life. It's like I have dialed 1-900 psychic. I am the number. I am the psychic. I know my own future. And my own future is the following. I find things that are attractive out there. Lust is born inside me. Desire is created inside me. Desire multiplied by lust, greed comes inside me. And you don't become greedy for things that are unpleasant, and you don't lust for things that are unpleasant, and you don't desire for things that are unpleasant. So behind every curtain of lust, there is a positive feeling. And behind every greed, there is a lust that gave you a good amount of pleasure. It's not God who brought you a girlfriend. Attraction.